It's a big mistake, a really big mistake.
This federal employee is outraged. We've agreed to hide her identity because she currently works for the US Census Bureau in Charlotte.
They put potentially so many people at risk.
A Fox 46 investigation discovered your tax dollars paid the salary of a convicted child sex offender. 44-year-old Kenneth Mabry was hired by the government last summer, tasked with recruiting employees for the upcoming 2020 census.
He was at many community events. He was at churches, at parades.
According to the state's sex offender registry, Mabry was convicted in Missouri in 2013 for attempting to molest an 11-year-old. He was sentenced to 3 years probation and required to register as a sex offender.
This should have popped up in his background investigation. It's upsetting. It's scary.
The Census Bureau promoted Mabry to office manager. He was put in charge of operations for the Charlotte region and by next year would have overseen 1,000 employees. After working here for 7 months, Mabry was eventually fired, only after he was arrested again. In March, he was charged with molesting a 9-year-old girl.
We were provided no information about his dismissal.
This internal email sent to employees nearly a week after his arrest gives no mention of why Mabry was fired or how his sex offender status was missed. Instead, employees were told not to talk to the media. We caught up with Mabry at his home, but he wasn't in the mood to talk.
Are you Kenneth Mabry?
Yeah.
I'm with Fox 46. We want to talk about your arrest. Why were you working for the Census Bureau? Did they know about your past convictions?
We wanted to know how the government could miss his sex offender status, since when you Google his name, it's the first thing that comes up. So we consulted private investigator Jan Barefoot, who has more than 30 years' experience doing background checks.
The background check was likely non-existent.
Since Missouri considers Mabry's case closed and no longer public record, Barefoot says Mabry's conviction likely would not have appeared on a criminal history report. But since Mabry is required to register as a sex offender, his status could have been easily found if they only bothered to check, exposing a potential flaw in the hiring process.
If their hiring policy is not to hire registered sex offenders, then it does appear they did not check the sex offender registry.
We asked the Census Bureau why the sex offender registry wasn't checked and if anything will change going forward. A spokesman says they can't comment on this specific case, but says they take this matter very seriously, adding, "We have rigorous hiring procedures and checks in place to catch these issues early on in the hiring process. We are training our employees to ensure that these procedures are followed. Those procedures should have included an FBI fingerprint check and a search of arrest records."
Once your background check clears, you will be scheduled for training.
The agency would not say what went wrong or if any completed background checks will now need to be redone.
Charged with statutory sex offense with a child, not an adult.
We were in court Wednesday when Mabry appeared before a judge.
I've not received a plea offer yet.
He did not enter a plea and his case was postponed until July. For now, Mabry remains free on bond.
Thank you. Thank you.
Asked to comment again, Mabry told me off camera, "Go away, goodbye." What will not go away anytime soon is his sex offender status, which should have kept him from working with the public in the first place. A mistake this woman says she can't forgive.
Something this major should not have slipped through the cracks.
Matt Grant, Fox 46 Charlotte.
Matt asked the Census Bureau if the employees responsible for conducting that background check will be disciplined. A spokesman said he cannot comment on personnel matters. Last year, the Office of Inspector General found the Census Bureau's background check office not fully prepared for the 2020 census, citing, quote, inadequate quality assurance practices.
Well, he was hired to manage the Charlotte region, and Fox 46 investigator Matt Grant spoke with a local lawmaker who is now taking action.
A third member of Congress now calling for a full investigation into what Fox 46 uncovered, that the Census Bureau hired and promoted a registered child sex offender to manage the Charlotte region.
Congresswoman, as the representative of Charlotte, what was your reaction to what we uncovered?
Well, I was shocked. I'm very concerned about it.
Representative Alma Adams is demanding answers and accountability.
So are you calling for an official investigation into how this was able to happen and how to prevent it from happening again in the future?
Oh, absolutely. And several of my colleagues have indicated that they are concerned as well. I don't think we'll know if we don't investigate what really happened. And I think we do need to know because this kind of thing should never happen again.
In March, Charlotte Census Manager Kenneth Mabry, who was hired despite being on the sex offender registry, was arrested again, accused of molesting a 9-year-old girl. This census employee is outraged.
He was at many community events. He was at churches, at parades. They put potentially so many people at risk.
6 months before Census hired Mabry last year, the agency was told its background check system was inadequate, not fully prepared, and warned unqualified and unfit job candidates could pass a background check.
If you get a warning like that, you need to heed it.
In 2016, the Census Bureau's background check system again came into question when the agency paid $15 million to settle a class action lawsuit. The lawsuit accused the agency of discriminating against minority job candidates with criminal histories, arguing they were not given enough time to explain their record. For its part, Census insists its background check system is rigorous and says employees are being trained to ensure procedures are followed.
We need to make sure that we clear all of this up so that we can move ahead without any additional problems.
This investigation is getting results on Capitol Hill. A month ago, we first uncovered the Census Bureau hired and promoted a registered child sex offender to manage the entire Charlotte region for nearly a year.
Fox 46's Matt Grant broke this story. He has more on the continued fallout from Congress.
Fox 46 is getting results after 5 bipartisan members of Congress said they're now demanding a full investigation in response to what we first uncovered a month ago, that the Census Bureau hired and promoted a registered child sex offender to manage the entire Charlotte region.
They put potentially so many people at risk.
For nearly a year, Kenneth Mabry collected a taxpayer's salary, despite being on the sex offender registry, for attempting to molest an 11-year-old.
He was at many community events. He was at churches, at parades.
Mabry's sex offender status was only discovered in March,
Charged with statutory sex offense with a child by an adult.
when he was arrested again, accused of molesting a 9-year-old girl. Months before Mabry was hired, the Census Bureau was warned that its background check system was inadequate and not fully prepared, even told unqualified or unfit applicants could pass a background check. Last month, Congresswoman Alma Adams told us she was shocked by what we uncovered, demanding answers and accountability.
I don't think we'll know if we don't investigate what really happened. And I think we do need to know, because this kind of thing should never happen again.
In this letter sent to the Office of Inspector General, nearly a half-dozen members of Congress, including Representative Adams and Senator Richard Burr, expressed serious concerns about Mabry passing a background check despite being on the state sex offender registry, writing, "It does not appear that this information was discovered, disclosed, or considered disqualifying, which raises a number of questions regarding the screening process," demanding an immediate investigation into the hiring and vetting process and calling for long-term steps to be taken to ensure this egregious mistake does not occur again.
A Census Bureau official would only tell me this is an ongoing personnel matter and says they appreciate the Inspector General's oversight. In the newsroom, Matt Grant, Fox 46 Charlotte.
Well, of course, I'm concerned about that as a parent, as a grandparent.
I sat down with Congresswoman Alma Adams at her Charlotte office. A week ago, Adams and 4 bipartisan North Carolina lawmakers sent this letter demanding an investigation into the Census Bureau's hiring practices. This after Fox 46 first discovered for nearly a year the agency hired Kenneth Mabry, a registered child sex offender, and then promoted him to manage the entire Charlotte region.
When your colleagues saw our investigation, were they just as shocked and surprised as you were?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, at the least, when people are hired to do these kinds of jobs, we really should know who we're hiring. That's number one.
Mabry was only fired after he was arrested again in March, accused of molesting a 9-year-old girl.
Because the Census Bureau needs to fill thousands of positions across the country, recruiting efforts are already underway.
The Census Bureau is in the middle of hiring 500,000 temporary employees to carry out next year's headcount at a projected cost of more than $15 billion. Adams wants to make sure that money is going to good use, and employees who will be knocking on your door are properly vetted.
It took us just 5 seconds to Google his name. It was the first thing that popped up was his sex offender registry status. It makes you wonder if they're even checking it at all.
I think that whatever process they had in place, and I don't know what it is yet, was not followed.
Adams says she and other members of the North Carolina delegation will meet next week with the Office of Inspector General, looking for answers and accountability.
We need to correct what went wrong and make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Matt Grant, Fox 46 Charlotte.